Welcome to World Rowing's Coastal Race Module Keynote series. In this workshop, we're going to cover rescue drills. My name's Guin Batten. I'm a former Olympic silver medalist and World Rowing Coastal champion. So let's get going. In this session, we're going to cover some basic safety and rescue drills. The three most important of which are the swim and float drill, the beach orientation, and capsize and re-entry drill. We're also going to cover the drills for the capsize of a quad, man overboard, and look at some types of towing and carry rescues. So, first up, the swim and float test. Critical test for beginners that come to your club, for you to be able to know for certain that they are competent swimmers and able to float. This is a really important part of the work that you will be doing in the first couple of months as they come to the club. The key task you're looking at is can your rowers swim at least 50 meters and keep their head above water unassisted for 3 minutes. Your next task you're going to ask them to do is just to check their confidence of putting themselves underwater. So you're going to ask them to put their head underwater. And then the third task in the test is really important because we don't wear life jackets in coastal rowing. We have them on the boat, and they may at some stage in their time be required to put that life jacket on while they're treading water. So the task is, while floating, to put on a life jacket, inflate it by blowing into a mouthpiece, and float for a further 3 minutes. If you get this test right, it's good fun, everybody's enjoying themselves, and it's a real opportunity for your group to bond with each other. So as a coach, you want to do a series of preparations. You want to make sure that all your athletes, you know that if they have any underlying medical conditions that you need to know about, and also you need to also know that everybody can swim. Clothing, it's best done rowing kit, or if the water is cold, make sure everyone has an opportunity to wear a wetsuit if you've got them. Best place to do it is a swimming pool, especially if you can't guarantee the cleanliness of the water you're in, or a shallow, clear, calm stretch of water. Safety-wise, make sure you do your risk assessment for the location that you choose, and ideally have a lifeguard present. That will impact on your ratios. My advice to you is keep the number of people in the water low, especially with beginners or juniors, and with your more experienced rowers, think about doing a buddy system. One looks after the other, one in the water, one outside the water watching. It's really good to do as an annual test to remind people of the skill of putting on their life jacket in the water, and also to give, especially in countries where there is a likelihood of cold water shock, to give them a familiarization each season, at the beginning of each season, of that cold water shock, so they can start to build that response and prepare for that response if they need to. Okay, right, so that's a very whirlwind tour of the swim and float test. So the next test, is very important, is the beach orientation. If it's the first time your rowers are coming down to your beach, your club beach, or it's the first time that you take a group of your rowers away to a new beach, it's absolutely critical that you conduct a beach orientation or familiarization with your group. And in that orientation, your aim is to explain the key features of the beach so that your rowers are aware. Now, these might be shallows, they might be rocks, they might be particular rips on certain stages of the tide. It might be certain marine animals like weaverfish or stingrays. It might be other river users, other water users, areas where jet skis might be allowed and areas where only swimmers are allowed. So your key bit there is to explain the features on the beach. Then the critical bit is to make sure everybody knows how to call for help, and the hand signals that you will be looking for as the coach on the land or on the water, and the hand signals they may be looking for from you if someone on the beach. The next task is to do a wave break walk or swim, and this depends on the steepness of the beach, but in essence you're looking to stay within about not going deeper than chest deep or shoulder deep, and in most cases on most swimming beaches this will be just a walk through a gentle break. So then finally, once they've done this, make sure that you do some questioning for understanding and some discussions of scenarios that might take place on that beach, so that you know that they know what you want them to know. Okay, the critical one is to ask each individual person, how do you call for help? So, preparation wise, make sure you do your research on the beach hazards. Great place to do is to contact the beach lifeguard and get them to give you their insights. Make sure you do a dynamic risk assessment. Clothing, it's good to have rowing kit or wetsuits if the water is colder. And you, as the coach, you'll have your coach rescue bag with you and a shelter, especially if it's cold, for the guys to change in, or a sun shelter if it's particularly hot while you're talking to them. What type of water should you be looking for? Look for a safe, calm part of the beach, and make sure that the wind conditions and the wave conditions are good for this type of activity. All participants should have confirmed that they can swim, and any of your less confident swimmers, encourage them to wear a flotation device. This might be a buoyancy aid, and ideally have a lifeguard present. Again, on ratios, keep your numbers of people in the water low for your beginners and juniors, and with your more experienced rowers, do a buddy system, one watching, one in the water. So there is some more details on this in the coach's toolkit. For more details on the session plan, and I suggest that you conduct it for each beach location, the new beach location that you go to, or at the start of each year. Especially with your group, you may have new athletes coming in. Okay, so that's a beach orientation. So now let's look at the capsize and re-entry drill. You've caught me out, haha. So really, just to remind you, calling for help on the beach, hand signals. It's a single arm in the air, waving left and right towards the beach. It's really important that your rowers know that that is the international sign for help in the water. You can also explain some further signals from the beach to the crew. And these are indicated in the PowerPoint below. Okay, now on to the capsize and re-entry drill. So the key reason you're doing this is so that your athletes can, in the unlikely event of a capsize, they are able to get themselves out of the water and self-rescue. It's absolutely, while the coastal boats tend to be wider and less likely to capsize than river boats, because we're in slightly more dynamic water, there is a chance that they will, especially the solos. So the tasks that you're testing in this drill is give them the familiarization of what a capsize feels like, the ability to find out how easy it is or how difficult it is to right a boat, and for themselves to experiment with two different types of re-entry, over the stern methods and over the side. It's really important that in an actual real life self-rescue situation, often people are tired, people are sometimes cold, and what we want them to be able to do is to do it first time. And if they're starting to do it, having to try 3 or 4 times to get in, they're going to be getting more and more tired, and that in itself becomes sometimes a real risk to their ability to self-rescue. So, and then fourth bit is really encourage creativity in the style of re-entry. This session can be so much fun. So make sure you do this with a mixture of seriousness and encouragement of creativity. So your preparations, make sure you do your dynamic risk assessment to make sure that you're happy doing it on the day that you propose to do it on. Clothing, same as the 2 tests before. Equipment, my advice is use solos. Don't have the blades in when you first do a capsize. Make sure you have your coach rescue bag and a shelter on the beach. Water, make sure it's safe and calm, or a pool. And really, I would advise being just over 1 meter deep. So shoulder length is shoulder depth is a good. Just need to make sure that people aren't necessarily using pushing off from the bottom as they try and do their re-entry. Ideally, have your lifeguard present and keep your ratios low, especially with beginners and juniors. So the critical points to stress when you're doing the capsize and re-entry with your athletes is that the rowers must always stay with the boat and never swim for shore. And the reason we say this is because the boat is the most important flotation device for them. The other aspect that we really want to stress is the importance of getting rowing after a capsize as a self-rescue technique and as a way to keep warm. If you are in a situation where you've got an offshore wind and the athletes don't attempt to get back in the boat and row back to shore, chances are that they'll be being blown further and further, or the tide might be taking them further and further away from shore, and they will be harder and harder to find. And it is really hard in rough conditions. It's really hard for the rescue services to locate low riding rowing boats or people in the water. And then finally, the third bit to stress to your rowers is if they're unable to start rowing, the critical bit is for them to get out of the water so that they can reduce the risk of hypothermia. Now, whether or not the boat has capsized and they're unable to right it, then they should aim to get on the top of the upturned boat and wave for help. Okay, so that capsize and re-entry drill, my recommendation is to do that at least once when you with your new groups, and then at least once every 2 years with your more experienced rowers. And often you can use your more experienced to support your newer rowers in that session that you're going to do with them. Okay, so let's talk now about the very unlikely chance of a quad capsizing. And the key bit in this, and my advice is potentially only do this with your more experienced rowers or rowers where you're potentially going to go into some extreme conditions. We do know of the occasional quad that has capsized. I know there's one that's been capsized in Great Britain, down in Exmouth over the last couple of years, and I do know of one that was capsized off the harbour wall in Barcelona about 10 years ago. So critical bit here is that if you are going to do it as a drill, make sure you do it in a controlled environment, and make sure that you could, in essence, put a fixed bow anchor so that the boat isn't necessarily going to blow away. But again, do a really good risk assessment if you do intend to do a quad capsize drill. There's some detailed information in the coach's toolkit. You can see a copy of this on the right hand side here. Okay, and it runs through the order. It's quite detailed of what tasks the rowers should do. But in essence, the most important thing is that you check that everybody is okay. And one of the best ways of doing that is to number off. Get the crew to number off and to make sure that everybody's come up after a capsize. Then the next step is to get into position. So it means that everybody gets into the right positions before you start to right the boat itself. Okay, and then once the boat is up, making sure that you get in one after the other so that you are not risking the boat being capsized again, especially if you're in a potential danger area where the boat had been capsized. So there's some detailed bits here around that drill, and do dive into the detailed running order here. I cannot stress enough the head count check. because it's critically important that nobody is trapped underneath the quad as it's gone over. Okay, so that's the quad capsize drill. Okay, let's talk a little bit about man overboard drill, and this is probably more likely to take place in fixed seat boats and or potentially someone fallen out of the safety boat, or somebody's taken a really big crab and been dragged by their blade out of the water. So your task when you're doing this drill is to locate a safe area of water, a person that will drop into the water. The spotter in the boat, the person who's been selected to be the spotter, would take control and call the boat to maneuver it back to the man overboard. Once you've managed to get level with the man overboard, the really important then is to recover them over the side of the boat or over the stern. There's various techniques about doing this, and my suggestion is it's always worth doing man overboard occasionally in your safety rib, just to see how difficult it is and how to bring someone up over the side of the rib. There are some real techniques, especially if they're wearing a buoyancy aid. You can push them down to bounce them up, and so there's some great techniques to do that. Or you can see in the picture up on the right here, there's strung a line, a rope along the side, so at least there's a little bit of help coming from the rope. That's quite hard to do because in many cases that line will slip underneath the hull of the boat. Always helpful to encourage experimenting as you bring someone back into the boat. And as far as the organising that drill's concerned, make sure you do a dynamic risk assessment, make sure you do a float plan if you're going to go out on the water, make sure people have got the right kit on, and for the person that comes out of the water, a warm jacket for them to put on if you're in cold weather. Make sure you have the coach rescue bag with you and a throw line. The water you're going to choose, make sure it's calm and ideally with warm conditions, and do avoid an offshore wind, because if it takes you a while to get them back on shore, you'll be blown quite a long way from the shore before you get yourselves sorted out. So really important that the man overboard should have a personal flotation device on. This could be a buoyancy aid. And if you're doing it just off the rowing boat, it would be best to have a safety launch in to accompany the position. Ratios, make sure you have only one person in the water. And as we said, they've got a personal flotation device on. So the critical bit here is make sure as the person falls over, there is one person in the boat who is keeping eyes on. You want to be able to identify exactly where that person is at all times. And then keep practicing getting the man overboard back into the boat. Takes practice to do. And if you're using a rib for the rescue, do be really careful about the propellers, especially if they're coming up over the stern of the rib. Because sometimes propeller edges are incredibly sharp, and it's very easy to put quite a deep slice in the bottom of your foot if you do slip as you come up the back of a rib. Okay, so that's very light touch on man overboard. Just want to now talk a little bit about towing, and this is probably the most likely rescue that's going to take place, and with the safety boat and a quad or a double scull. Key bit here is to make sure that you really strong communication with the crew captain, and that they know that they want a tow, and explain what you need them to do when you're going to pick up that tow. Sometimes the crew might not want a tow. They may be able to bring themselves in, and it may be easier to do that because there is a risk of damage in this drill. So the key bit for you as the safety belt launch driver is to pick up the tow line, and the tow line should be on the rowing boat. It's a requirement that they carry it, and they should be able to throw that to you. You will then tie your line to their line, and we'll look a little bit more in a couple of the knots that will help you. Secure their bow line to the bridle from your stern, or from the line from the stern of your motorboat. And you've really got a couple of options here. All the crew can stay seated in the rowing boat. That's one option. You need to make sure that you travel very slowly, if that is the case. The other option is to transfer the rowers to the motorboat and leave the coxswain behind to steer. Because of the nature of the under-hull surface of the coastal boats, the directional stability is not great, and it is much more easy for the coxswain to steer the boat from behind on a tow. Critical bit: safely motor to safety. Preparation: do your risk assessment, float plan, get the right kit, especially if if it's going to take a while, people waiting around for you to pick up that line. Make sure you've got your coach boat, coach rescue bag, and the throw line. Conditions: warm and calm, and definitely avoid offshore winds for this. For safety, make sure you've got your safety launch, which you're in, and make sure you have make sure you keep your ratios very low. So it'd be one crew, one boat, one rowing boat to one motorboat. Okay, make sure, a couple of cautions really, make sure you don't end up with a rope around the propeller shaft, and also don't put too much pressure on the cleat of the rowing boat. Keep your speed low and encourage the coxswain to steer. So that's towing astern. So talked a little bit about some of the knots for towing. A great knot is the bowline. Okay, this is the one where the rabbit comes out the hole, round the back of the tree and back down the hole. So make sure you can do that relatively easily. Clove hitch off the back of a motor launch is a good one. Or if you've got a cleat at the back of the launch, especially if you're going to do a side tow, a cleat hitch off the side of off the slide of your cleat. So those are just some general ones. Make sure you know how to do those, and then you'll find that you can do them in anger without any problem. Now, in my eyes, there are three types of rescue, and we've talked about astern towing, and that was the one we did just before. The next one is the towing alongside, and sometimes that's actually easier, where you actually use a spring, as in the diagram below, keeping the bow tucked in to the side of the boat, and using the section of the quad to be tucked in close to the boat. Okay, that takes a little bit of skill on that, especially the more experienced marine coaches may use that tow alongside. And then of course probably the easiest one for ribs, for the solo and for the double, is the carry, where you literally tie the boat down or hold the boat down across the top of the inflatable sections of the boat, and you remove the oars and get the athletes sitting in the boat. And we've got some pictures of the carry. Here's the carry. You can see here, nice picture here of a solo inside a rib. They've just put it along the side, and you can see another example here of a rib with a double scull, and you can see the two rowers down here that have been rescued, and you can see here the lifeguard and the rib passengers here. Okay, so that's the carry rescue, and that's the end of the session on rescue drills. If you want to have some more information, head into the World Rowing website, worldrowing.com, and find the Coastal Rowing booklet. There's a little bit more information in there and some pictures for you. And also, as I said earlier, especially around the beach familiarization and the orientation, there's a little bit more information about how to run that. Well done. That's the end of this keynote. If you liked what you heard, make sure you make comments below. And if you want to learn more about coastal rowing, find out what events and championships are taking place, make sure you head over to worldrowing.com and find out more about this really exciting sport. Take care. See you soon.